Wealth. My next guest on the One-on-One series is a commentator and advisor on the very important subject of wealth, one of Australia's most prominent people in this arena. It's my very great pleasure to introduce you to Peter Switzer. You know a lot about money. Okay. You've made your life about educating yourself and others about money. And what frustrates me, Peter, is that the education system fails in that regard. My son's been right through school. They never taught him how to create money and then how to use that money to create more wealth for yourself and your family so that you're not a slave to earning money your whole life.
Yeah.
And I know this is one of your missions as well. I just feel so passionate about it, and I'm so happy that you're here, that you can share some of your insights and people can understand how to best use money and create wealth for themselves.
Yeah. Let me create some excuse for those much maligned teachers who haven't taught your son how to become wealthy in the future. And the reason I'm doing it is twofold. One is I used to be a teacher, so I know what bums kids can be in the classroom, and I try and explain something like money and make it really interesting. Well, very few teachers are actually qualified to do that as well, because they go to university. The lecturers, I was a lecturer in economics at the University of New South Wales, they're really smart people, but people aren't good at teaching people. That's the tricky bit. Professors think people turn up to listen to them because they're really smart. Well, no, they don't. They're there to get a degree, to get a job, to one day be wealthy, and hope that they earn so much money, it doesn't matter that they don't understand what money, what you have to do with money to get wealthy, or they go to somebody else to make it happen. But going to somebody else to make it happen often is very risky as well, if you're not savvy enough to understand what's going on. So what you want for your son is brilliant, but how you get it is another thing. I've written a book called Join the Rich Club, and I've sold a lot of those books, but not as many as I would like to sell. Not for my own personal wealth, though I don't mind personal wealth, but I really have tried to make the complicated stuff that people go to a financial planner for in a really entertaining and interesting way. And the feedback I get is, yes, it is entertaining. A, it is B, it's understandable. But still, to get people to stop going to Facebook or watching the rugby league and all the stuff that I like as well, but I can afford to do it because I've spent over 10,000 hours doing the money stuff, and so I think we have to make money sexy. If you don't make money sexy, it can't compete with rugby league, it can't compete with Facebook, it can't compete with the Kardashians. That's what you got to do to get your son and other sons and daughters interested, and not just them, older people too. People of our age, they're still not interested in money, despite the fact they need it more than anyone else.
Yes. Yeah. So why? Yes. Well, why is that?
You seem excited about this subject.
Well, it's so important. That's the thing. I mean, if there's one thing that'll cause you stress in life is lack of money. You can't pay your bills. You can't do what you want to do. Money to me equals freedom. So how do we get people to? What are your top tips to?
I wish
it's a big subject.
Yeah, it's a big subject. Look, I think the bottom line is people get inspired by mentors or teachers or brilliant fathers. Clearly you're not a brilliant father, Paul.
Clearly.
Great guy, but not a brilliant father because you're worried about your son. And isn't it funny how we pass it off to teachers, but really in many ways as parents we're leaders as well.
Yes.
And ironically, if you objectively said, well, I'm not all great at money, but I'm going to go out and get Switzer's book and read it and become better, then say to my son, look, I've learned this. And he might say, yeah, if they can do it, well, I can do it.
Okay,
there has to be a momentum thing. And by the way, do not think I'm brilliant with my own sons as well, because kids often don't want to listen to their parents.
But they want to make money and keep money.
Yeah, and I've got to say, through osmosis, both my sons have. Well, one is a CEO of a financial institution that's listed on the stock market. So he's kind of learnt something along the way.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Yeah, and the other guy always wants to beat his older brother, so he's good in what he's doing. He's running Harper's Bazaar magazine, Esquire magazine for the business. So, but still, they've been lucky. They've hung out with money people like. His mum's a lawyer, she's an economics person as well, and all that sort of stuff. So it's been around
them
and
all the time.
Yeah, that's right. So I think the important thing is that as parents, as leaders of our kids, we have to show that money is important. It doesn't have to be the be-all and end-all, but there are a lot of things that life becomes easier if you've got
a certain amount is required.
Exactly right. And how that can be achieved. And it doesn't have to be where someone gives up a real lot, but they do have to learn something, and they have to also decide that, like, one of the best books ever written, apart from my books, of course, is The Richest Man in Babylon. And this is a very simple book where the bottom line lesson was, way back in the age of the Mesopotamia and where Babylon came from. Some guy said to another guy, take 10% of everything you earn and save it. All right, so before you pay yourself, take that 10% out. Now that rule still applies. If people I know had always taken 10% out and put it into superannuation, for example, sure, they can't touch it until they retire, but when they retire, they'll really have a whoopee of a life because they've done that. And I think parents need to A, understand it, and B, talk about that.
And budgeting, I think I agree with you, because budgeting is so hard. So I'll spend that much on that and that much on that. And it all just becomes too hard. Yeah. And I said to my son, you'll be pleased to hear he was reading that book last night.
Oh, right.
True story.
Yeah.
If you take 10% out, you've got 90% to spend. It's not that hard to do. And the other thing I said to my son Bo is, that means that 1 year in 10 of work, you're keeping the whole lot. If you think of it that way, you could take a whole year off every 10 years and have it paid for.
Yeah, you could.
I know. People don't realise how 10% is so... And then you've got the mechanism of using that 10% to create more wealth. Yep. Maybe you could talk about that.
Look at everything you're spending and then cut everything you're spending by 10% if you can. Difficult to tell your landlord you're going to cut his rent by 10%. But, you know, the alcohol you buy, the food you buy, the restaurants you go to, you can actually cut that by 10%. And that becomes the saving, which then becomes the basis of investing. And that's the second part of the story.
Right.
So what we then have to teach kids and adults is, what do you do with that 10%?
Yeah, good question.
All right. There's a 10-year cycle.
Right.
And this is really important. This is going to be a very important educational lesson.
Okay.
Over a 10-year period, the stock market will return, historically based, going right back into early 1900s, even before.
Oh, we're talking more than 100 years.
Yeah, more than 100 years. It returns about 10% per annum over a 10-year period. It means that, you know, those 10 years, you might get a 25% fall in one and a 33% fall in the other, but you'll get big rebounds as well. And so if you look at those 10-year periods, you get a 10% per annum. So if you're prepared to stay in for 10 years, you might have to get it on the 8th of the 10 years, but over a 10-year period, it returns a 10% return. And half of it comes from dividends. Now, now, believe it or not, in the old days, when we were trying to do that, there was no such product that would give you the whole stock market in one trade. But nowadays, there are things called exchange traded funds, or ETFs. Now, a fund, of course, is something that pools everyone's money together.
Yep.
They invest, and they pay you a dividend or a distribution every year. That's what super funds do. That's what managed money funds do. But an exchange traded fund is something you can buy on the stock market, just like buying BHP or CBA. You can buy an exchange traded fund. I'll give you some ticker codes. One is called IOZ. That's because iShares makes it, and Oz is Australia.
Yeah.
Right. And that gives you a chance to buy the top 200 companies in Australia in one trade. All right? There's A200, that comes from...
So it's much safer.
because you've got diversification.
Yeah.
And you're buying the best 200 companies in Australia, and it's got a history of returning 10% per annum over a 10-year period.
Is that compounding?
Well, it compounds on itself,
Yeah.
But if you want the per annum return,
Yeah.
it's going to be about 10%. Sometimes it's 11, sometimes it's 9, but it averages out around 10.
Which you can't get if your money's in the bank, right?
Exactly. Well, term deposits were 1% for a long time.
Yeah.
All right. Now, what's really interesting is if something returns 10% per annum over a 10-year period, your money will double every 7.2 years. Do you know why? This is how I entertain people at dinner parties. Right? This is called the rule of 72. The rule of 72. So if you take the number 72 and someone says to you, I'll give you 9% on your savings.
Yes.
You divide the 9 into 72, you get 8. Your money doubles every 8 years. If they give you 6% return, your money doubles every 12 years. 6 into 72 is 12. Look, I'm not going to explain why, just believe me.
It just is.
Yeah, mathematicians have worked it out, and it works, right?
Right.
And so when people come to my financial planning business and they've got $1 million, and I say to them, look, we'll construct a portfolio where you get 7% return, because 7% is kind of better than term deposits.
Yeah.
It's and we build it up by maybe 60% will be in the stock market and 40% will be in safer kind of bonds, all right? Mm-hmm. And bonds usually pay, like term deposits, maybe a little bit better. So I can then say, well, in 10 years' time, your million will be 2 million, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Of course, if you take X amount out, well, it'll take longer to get to 2 million.
Yeah.
But there are all these little rules. Now, I say to a young person, if they ever get a windfall of money, if someone leaves them some money or whatever.
What should they do?
Well, I think if they're trying to build up a deposit, they're not going to do it via a term deposit, right? They're going to do a deposit for a house. They're going to have to try and get 7 or 8 or 9 or 10% return. All right. So that is an ETF is a really good way of doing it.
Okay.
All right. Now, it might mean the year you get in, the market falls by 25%, but as you said, you just have to hang in there.
You're looking for what will happen in 7 to 10 years, not what will happen tomorrow morning.
Yeah, and I'm not saying buy every ETF, because some ETFs are really exotic ones. Like, I'm in an ETF that's really exotic, right? But I can afford to be an exotic one.
So you have a small percentage of your wealth, so the main wealth that you have to protect
the core
is in a more conservative,
is reliable type
and then
one.
you can take a risk on small bits.
Yeah. I'm in one really unusual one called HNDQ.
HNDQ.
Yeah.
Are you going to tell us what that stands for?
Yes, it's like the H stands for hedging. Hedging, what's hedging? Well, if the Australian dollar jumps around, you can make or lose money on what happens to the Australian dollar. I once went into another interesting ETF called the Triple Q. What's the Triple Q? Triple Q buys the NASDAQ, the high-tech NASDAQ. When did I buy it? After the NASDAQ crashed in the dot-com crash of 2000, 2002. Everyone was scared, yes. And I said, well, the market's crashed. There's some of the best names I figure of the future. That was 2000. Those best names were Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, Alphabet.
Wow.
I figured one day they're going to come good.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, you're right about that.
So we went to Triple Q in our family super fund. But one thing I left out was what could happen to the Australian dollar. And as it rose, the Triple Q, and it means that more money was coming from America.
Because this is offshore.
Yeah, well, Triple Q is a NASDAQ, American market.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it has to convert to Australia. Okay, I get you.
Yeah. And so it's better the Australian dollar falls, because when the American money comes in, you get a lot more Australian dollars. But if the damn Aussie dollar rises with the NASDAQ, you don't do as well. Right. And that's what happened. And I learned a very important lesson there. I was a genius, allegedly a genius in 2000, but I'm a better genius now. When I think the currency is going to rise, I hedge it. Now this HNDQ is the top 100 stocks in the NASDAQ, and that gives me Tesla, Alphabet, all those companies. Now that's up something like, it's up about 60% since November. So I've killed them. I've really got it right.
Whoa, 60%.
Yeah, but I would never recommend that for normal people. But it was something like a small portion of my portfolio I put in HNDQ.
Yes.
Because I can afford to do
If it goes pear-shaped, it's not going to kill you.
Exactly. But I think if a person's trying to build up their wealth, say over a 10-year period,
that's
and the market is down,
Yeah.
buying something like an ETF that gives you the top 200 stocks in Australia,
Yeah.
historically is going to be a much better return than a term deposit. But it's riskier than a term deposit. Term deposit, you get your money back, but it's really hard to build your wealth up for a deposit. That's the important part.
Look, it's not about getting rich though, Peter, is it? It's more
Richer,
about...
I think. There is the average kind of wealth a person ends up from working hard, not taking any risks, and that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But there's also, you can make yourself richer. And the smart thing is, if people want to get wealth, is, contribute as much as they can to super. Try and get a foothold into property. Some people, young people, decide, because they've got good jobs, but they still haven't got the ability to raise a deposit, they sometimes buy an investment property as a sort of like a foot into the property market.
Yep.
They're negatively geared, so their tax comes down as a consequence of having a negatively geared property.
Yep.
And as they get wealthier and they get paid more, they effectively could move into that property.
Yeah.
Or they could use that
That's a strategy.
Yeah. Yeah. I think a lot of younger people are doing that nowadays.
That's good.
Yeah, and I think it does provide rental properties. It does also push up the price, but until the government really looks at the problem of councils really being tough on people who want to build homes, that is a big problem.
They've got to cut some red tape, haven't they?
Exactly.
You've been very enlightening, and thank you so much for coming in today. It's been a pleasure meeting you.
Yes,
and I hope everyone out there has learned something. I certainly have.
Great.
You're a good guy. Thanks a lot.
My pleasure. My pleasure.